Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a lovely October. I'm having a very slow, lazy October. It feels like the weight of the world is crashing in all around us. So let's talk about some fun stuff instead. How about that? So, I've been trying to work through a couple of the Inktober prompts. Obviously, not in ink. This is gouache. But, I like following along to random prompts. I think it's a good exercise. I ended up liking this one quite a bit. I've decided to try and work her into our larger magic system. So that's what we're going to do. Just to begin with, she's giving off vague Ice King vibes to me. Could be the crown and the red jewels, but also I think the idea behind it where, the crown is potentially affecting her a bit. What with the jewels breaking through her body and whatnot. Not exactly Ice King-ish, but I don't know. As I was working on this, one my kids put Adventure Time on the TV, which my husband hates, and he's like, "Hey, wait a minute, that looks kind of like the thing you were working on," and now I can't unsee it. But she's not Ice King. She's not a Lady Ice King. She's not bubblegum with a crown. Um, I was just going with the third Inktober prompt crown, and magic crown. That seems to be what you know you think of if you think of like a Halloween prompt and crown, like some sort of, I don't know, evil magical influence of some sort, right? That's where my mind goes. So that's kind of what I went with. And it just happened to work out that way. So, quick side note, the Goblin Fairy Princess Parents painting, still working on that. That should be the next painting. This one was supposed to be a lot faster. The first Inktober prompt that I did was like a short, and I had intended for all of them to be shorts, just pieces that didn't take very long. And I ended up spending a lot more time on this than originally planned, but I really liked it. So I just kept working on it. I think I spent like, I don't know, 10 hours, 11 hours on it. Mostly because, as you're going to see, I painted things and then I changed my mind, and then I painted other things and then I changed my mind. And some of these little jewel details, I had to spend a bit of time going back and forth and layering to get them to look kind of how I wanted them to. So it was a little bit more time consuming, so I decided to make it a long form video and as I mentioned, work it into our story. Now I think working this in is going to be less of this is about this person and more about like the general lore of what's happening, maybe more about I can work this in as part of the prompt is this is more about the crown itself, the magical object. So, just a quick reminder, in our magic system, we've got the magical world, realm, dimension, magic things, people who were pulled dimensionally away from the strictly human world. Now, from the very beginning, there have been weak points and cracks where magic has bled in. Most of the magical creatures who were left behind lived and died as mortal people eventually, because they just didn't have the same kind of magic or life force to sustain them as they would if they had access to the magic that they ought to. That being said, the ones that maybe lived close to some of these weak points and or had objects that still had magic in them, were able to survive and or evolve to survive, basically work within the means of the very limited magic that had been left behind in the mortal realm. So I think of it kind of like the crown, specifically the magical object. I think that it's one of those objects that was left near, in, or around a weak point. So it was able to stay sentient, I suppose you could say. Like it's a living thing. It's an object, but it has like a spirit to it that really powerful magic objects have. I think that probably most magical items that were left behind, or there aren't anywhere near any of these weak points or cracks, are probably, I want to say dormant. Like maybe the weaker ones just kind of blinked out. And even when magic completely bleeds back in and the two realms are one again, some of those objects are going to be dead, basically. But this crown is not one of those. It was a lot more powerful. Let's see. Obviously, it seems like some sort of cursed object, but maybe it ended up in the hands of like a human person instead of like one of the magical folk. So, okay. So if we have magical creatures that got left behind and essentially get stuck living as mortals, or they adapted. So maybe you had magical creatures that found ways to sustain themselves other ways. I have storylines that go into that, but those are for later. And then we've got others who maybe collected some of the bits of magical objects that are left, maybe ones that figured out their weak points and they kind of built little towns or settlements near or around some of these weak points. I imagine if they're fairies specifically and or certain types of magic folk, witches, whatever, they probably are jealously guarding the areas they've discovered, and maybe they move around a little bit, you know? As we've talked about in previous stories, the higher consciousness regularly opens and moves around portals in an attempt to kind of break this separation. So maybe they have to move around sometimes to find the different magical spots. That could be cool. Having to, maybe some of them are more stable than others. Wouldn't it be it'd be kind of funny if there's like a Halloween town out in the woods somewhere because there's just this massive crack in the divide between human and magic, so all these critters just, they're not critters, they're magical humanoid things. They just all live in the same place in like one area. But I think that it would be limited to a point that they'd kind of be stuck. Like if they travel too far away, maybe they live and die like humans do, unless they found some other way to sustain themselves. That's a hint about future magical stories. Keep that in mind. So I think maybe with this specific magical item, in the hands of somebody who's not like a powerful being, some sort of fairy or elf or really powerful witch, I imagine the magic kind of overtakes them. Maybe like in a kind of King Midas situation where like you got what you asked for, but also is it what you asked for? Not really. So how would they ask for it if they had no idea? Maybe it's like an Indiana Jones situation where there's like all of these rumors and they're like, hey, there's this magical crown. And everybody just didn't believe it anymore because, you know, magic's not in the world anymore. So they think. And so somebody just sought it out and they're like, the powerful crown. And then, you know, it just kind of turns them into jewels or something. I think it would be a little bit more complex than that. Not just that she was devolving into, you know, jewels, she, they, whoever is wearing the crown. But maybe it's a matter of like turning them into something else. Maybe maybe it turns them into some other type of magical, like it infuses and merges with the being of that person. That could be cool. But then what would that turn her into? What would that turn this person into? Would they be then a magical creature? Are they just a conduit for the spirit of whatever this magical object is? Also, is it like a spirit like it used to be a person? Or could it be... I think magic would be more complicated than that. Kind of the way in our universe we've got this like higher being that isn't like a humanoid person, but it is definitely affecting change, trying to break the separation, right? So maybe it has some sort of spirit to it like that, but it's not like humanity the way we think of humanity. It's just an energy. It's a life force, right? And it's not good or bad. It just exists. And whoever the host happens to be turns into something else. Maybe specifically because the wearer is mortal and not one of the more powerful creatures, and because it's able to inhabit like this person's body and in a complete way, in a way that it couldn't when being maybe wielded by a really intense magical creature that could, you know, utilize the power but hold the consciousness at bay, and a mortal's not able to do that. Maybe even if it's a type of like magical creature that got left behind, but they don't have access to their normal power. So thinking that using this crown would help them keep their status, keep the power, allow them to survive, not realizing that it was holding a significant amount of power. It didn't have to recharge. I kind of imagine like fairies and elves or some of these other magical creatures. It's a matter of, they take it from the environment. They have access to it and can utilize it, but it's something they had to draw from. And maybe this magical artifact, this crown, is something that has like stored a large amount of energy. Yeah, okay. So maybe our magical creature was trying to use this crown in hopes of maintaining their immortal life in the meantime. And instead, because they didn't have the power to protect themselves, the crown takes over their consciousness, maybe merges with it. Maybe not takes over. Maybe it's like a symbiotic relationship, but definitely this person turns into something else. Also foreshadowing for other stories. Maybe it allows them to survive, but only by being something else. But what is that something else? I'm not sure. We'll have to work that out. I like the way it's going, though. It's an interesting idea. I think it makes sense. I think it would make a pretty compelling storyline in terms of, like, if you're trapped here and you're trying to survive, and if you're some sort of immortal fairy creature, a human lifespan feels like an imminent death sentence, right? So you're doing whatever you can. And even if you realize that this crown is turning you into something else, what are your other options, right? So you lean into it, and you lean into understanding that you're not going to be who you were anymore, but you'll survive. I like it. But what is she turning into? How do you hide that? It's like the worst breakout ever, but pretty because jewels. Anyway, I think that's where I'm at. I think I don't have anything else to add to it right now. I think I'd have to do some more development for this. But I like the larger concepts that I've kind of come up with working on this. Let me know what you think. I'm curious to hear what your opinions are. As always, if you like my video, please like it. And if you are interested in seeing more like it, please subscribe. I'm open to thoughts and opinions, feelings, and let me know what you think. I hope to see you all at the next one. Bye, guys.